Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Can we hear you all right? We'll just wait for a few more people to join in, a few stragglers, as we always have on webinars. Hope everyone's had a great day. Hi Phil, welcome aboard mate. Feel free to pop through any questions, use your chat service there. We'll see if we can get to as many questions as we can throughout the presentation. If we don't get to all of them, we'll get back to you on email post the presentation, and we hope to make it available for your revision later on. So I've got my trusty sidekick here helping me out. We're just waiting for some more people to join the room, and we'll get started. It's worth mentioning that post this webinar, we're going to send you out an email, which will have a couple of worksheets in it that you can work on post to help identify your gaps with any wealth creation that you may have, help you get on track. And obviously, you can always reach out and help you post the presentation as well, tailor something a little bit more personal to your needs. How are we going for time? We've got a few more coming in there. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Tyson, and I run the Financial Services Department here at the Coronis Group. We're one of the largest privately owned real estate businesses in Queensland. We have rent roll, property sales, financial services from mortgage broking, financial planning. We have our own in-house conveyancing, where we can provide help with conveyancing, and also helping a lot of our clients with their building and pest inspections and all those things. So really, we aim to be a one-stop shop to help all of our clients along the way. We find that it's a really nice value proposition, being that all property services and all in one place to help our clients. I think we might get started. We've got a few people online, which is really cool. So great to have you all here tonight. Where's my mouse gone? So first one, obviously, when it comes to financial services, it's important to just let you guys know that tonight's more of a general information session. So none of this is really tailored to anyone's situation, and we should really, review you and your individual circumstances and your individual goals before proceeding and implementing any of this advice, if any. And we do recommend that you sit down and get a full plan and review of your situation, which we can obviously help out with down the track. Tonight's agenda, we're going to be looking at defining your wealth gap. We'll be going over building a deposit, outlining the possible investment strategies and structures that are available to you on this journey, things to avoid, which is really important, but also, things that, tips and tricks on how to move forward as well. And importantly, utilising that equity that may exist within existing properties, or utilising equity and how it works moving forward to help build your portfolio and potentially close that wealth gap. All right. So as you can see here, the wealth gap, or the gap as we refer to it. This is a slide that we'll be making available to you post the presentation, so you can fill out the questionnaire yourself and identify your own individual gap. And really, I guess, have a little bit of a confronting moment, because as you can see down there, of 100 Australians that are of age 25 now, 63 will be flat broke. One will be what we classify as rich. 4 will be independently wealthy. 5 or so will still be working. That's probably me. I love it too much. And the morbid side of things, with 27 having passed away. So it's really important, I think, to really contextualise and think about closing that gap, because what you can achieve within a 10 to 20 year time horizon is really impressive. And if we have a look at this scenario, we're just assuming that we want to live on $100,000 a year. Now, I'm not sure if anyone's done some research lately, but I just had a quick look at the age pension, and I wouldn't really want to be living on that. For a couple, it's about $622.80 per week, and if you're single at that stage, it's $413 per week. So I'm not quite sure how these poor people are getting by or how they're living. but I wouldn't want to be living on $33,000 a year as a couple on a pension. So I've said here about $100,000 of lifestyle, just in this example. So I'd like $100,000 in my retirement. 20-year multiple, so I've got 20 years to really create that and drive that. Obviously when I retire when I go to the other side, I'm going to need a pool of $2 million worth of assets. Then obviously what I've accumulated now in terms of superannuation, so myself and my partner, we then subtract that from the balance that we'll need, plus any other investments, so $60,000 worth of shares or some savings and cash that might be in the bank that they could be made up of. And we come up with our wealth gap of $1.82 million. So with 20 years left to retire, that can be quite confronting. And I think that it's really, when we do this with a lot of our clients, it can become quite confronting how big those numbers are and how large that gap is. And like I said, I think that's why potentially 63% of Australians are flat broke. Now they're doing a lot of research and a lot talking in the news at the moment about superannuation and how it's not performing to meet our needs and how most people will retire on pension. So it's really important now to take a holistic view of our position, to make out a plan. So as though when we get to retirement age, or even before, if you're fortunate enough, you really retire on your own terms and continue to live the lifestyle that you want. So tonight, it's all about developing a property strategy. And it's really high level because obviously everyone's situations are different. But what we really want to do is create the idea and get you thinking about getting on that journey as quickly as possible. Because like I said, the sooner we get started, the sooner that we can have those outcomes that we're looking for, and the time horizons aren't that long. So things to consider. Ultimately, why are you investing? A lot of people just buy property because their friends have and they've seen their mum and dads, and other people create wealth through property. But it's important that you understand why you're going down that path, whether you're using shares or funds, fund managers, all those sorts of things. When are you ready to invest? If not, when do you want to get going? Do you have a plan in place? Do you understand where your expenditures are going? Do you understand where you've got savings gaps or space where you could potentially start to save and contribute more money into your savings accounts? Do you have savings accounts structured for high yield interest so you can grow that savings passively in your favour? Look, a lot of people could potentially be closer to buying their first investment property than they realise, and that's where this utilisation of equity and potentially a family home or already existing investment property that you may have. So it's really important, I guess, reach out. We can sit down and we can identify that really quite quickly, and often we find that people are closer to purchasing that first property than they actually realise. Where we invest. So we invest which suburbs, which states. There's a whole heap of things that you need to nut out and ask yourself, really help define your, I guess, investment strategy. So as though you've got some structure around what you're doing. Are you going to go directly or indirectly? What that means is, are you, the individual, going to go and buy the house, or are you going to use entities or self-managed super funds and trust structures to buy the properties and set them up for other mitigating reasons? What's your investment strategy? What is the end game? Why are we doing this? What's the end state look like? And we can work backwards from there. How do we know when we've achieved what we want to achieve? Who are the parties that are going to be involved? Are you going to be doing this with some friends, some family, brothers and sisters, mums and dads? How do you structure that so as though you can maintain an amicable family or friendships, and everyone needs to be on the same page moving forward? Time and time again, we see people jump in together. They think it's a great idea to invest, and some people's needs or direction or life take them in an opposite direction, and there's no strategy or thought to, well, how do we help someone out of this investment together? Do we buy them out? Do we all have to sell? What happens if we have to sell and it's not an ideal time in the market? Could that potentially cause some losses that aren't necessarily planned for? And how much do you have to invest? How much do you invest? Lots of questions there. How much time do you have to get to where you need to be? How much should you be borrowing? These are all great questions that you should be, I guess, formulating some answers and some direction around, so as though you can get to where you want to be. So we touched on it briefly just then. What is the right investment structure? So there's some great options out there. Like I said, a direct investment, potentially you going out there and buying it yourself in your own name, or yours and your partner's names, or you and your brother or your sister, to really start creating that wealth creation in a direct fashion. Fractional investment, which is, I don't know, have people have heard a lot about bricks. It's a website out there. It's a digital platform where through an online portal you can buy pieces of a property. So as you can see, a lovely pie chart there that we've designed just highlights that you can own a potential slice of a property. So you could potentially set up a property unit trust. 3 or 4 friends could potentially go in, and you could all start to pool and take yourselves on a wealth creation journey with well-defined scope around what the mandate of that fund is and what you're trying to achieve. But ultimately, if there's 4 of you in there, it could be an even spread of 25% all round, or depending on how much you contribute, will potentially dictate the amount of ownership that you have, capital gains, capital losses. All of those things would obviously be shared proportionally through the ownership of that fractional investment structure. Another one that's hot in the market at the moment, and we get a lot of people asking about, is buying through their self-managed super fund. Quite a complex structure, something that you should definitely seek advice on from a specialist. So just to make sure that, one, there's enough in the fund to achieve that, so minimum deposits. There is a limit on the number of people that can be members of a self-managed super fund, thus the number of people that can contribute to buy property. We've got Jeff there. How much do I need to have to buy a property? Great question. In your super fund, different banks will have what they want as a different balance post the purchase of the property. So it might be that you can have a maximum LVR of say 70 to 60%, and they want to see 30% of that property held over in funds in the balance of that super fund. But that's very specific to the individual lender, which really, I guess, highlights the need there to sit down and have a conversation with someone to either get that on track for yourself, or at least what the goal is, so you can start making some contributions to the super fund, start beefing it up to potentially buy property in there. One thing that we do see a fair bit of is people who are small business owners potentially wanting to buy their premise and hold that in their super fund. You're a pretty sturdy tenant, so you're able to make some contributions to the fund. So there's lots of different ways to structure that. You obviously, if you're buying the property, you can't live in the property. It's a pure investment. So it's really imperative that you do sit down and get an understanding of what you can and can't do when using a self-managed super fund, because there are a lot of limitations around that asset. Okay, it's not like buying one directly. I just thought I'd highlight, this is quite a complex graph. I don't expect everyone to get it, but what I was really trying to show is how technical the structure is when setting up a self-managed super fund and borrowing. So you have what we refer to as the trustees of the fund and the bare trust, which is the holding trust for the property, and the way in which the money flows. It's really important that you get those ownership structures right, and you seek some advice around that, because the names in which the owners of the property when purchasing it are really important. So if you're purchasing the wrong name, you could potentially be up for significant stamp duties if you need to change names of ownership and structures like that. So it's really important to get those structures set up, or at least have an understanding of what they are and where they're going to be before you go embark on buying property through your super fund. Some tips when selecting an investment property. Okay, obviously everyone's looking for capital growth. It's really important. There's no guarantees around capital growth. You hear that saying all the time, past performance is no indicator of future. Very true. In property shares, it doesn't matter. There are no guarantees in this. And with real estate, historically, you get strong growth over the medium to longer term. So it's a longer term approach to wealth creation. But you know, over historic periods, you can see that extended growth. So the 10 to 15 the 10 to 15 year time horizon is typically what you're looking at for when you're building your wealth in your property. And there's obviously things that you can do to help with capital growth. You can put some elbow grease in, renovate kitchens, coat of paints, gardens, renovate, all those sorts of things. But there's no guarantee that that will actually help with the capital growth. You really need to be mindful of how much you put into the property, because obviously you've still got to get that back in terms of the spend when growing the capital value of the property. When getting your rental yields and you're looking for a property to purchase, it's really important to get 2 or 3, preferably 3 rental appraisals. Get an understanding of what people see the property renting for in the marketplace. Typical rental yields are between 4 to 4.5%. So making sure that you get those 3 appraisals, and if they're all coming in low, it's not a good investment. Okay, move on. Really arm yourself with information and do the research about property. You can track suburbs now really well on realestate.com. There's a lot of information there around what properties are renting for in what areas, and vacancy rates as well. So you can calculate and really work out where are the hot suburbs, where are people wanting to rent, versus where people not have an appetite for. Government spending and infrastructure. A lot of people overlook this. Government can come in and put in parks, hospitals, schools, all of those services. They can increase or potentially invest in infrastructure in areas which then create demand for housing, people to come and live and work in that infrastructure. The growth of schools, teachers, kids coming into those areas and those precincts, definitely drive demand on areas. And a lot of people, potentially don't look and to see where the government's going to be investing and spending money over time. And then that obviously comes down to your demographic research. What's the area where you're potentially holding your rental property? What do they look like? What are their ages? What drives them and brings them to that area? Are they there to go to university? Is there great schools in the area? Is it a highly sought after and prestigious postcode that people want to live in, potentially, moving up and relocating for work and chasing those suburbs to live in? Occupation, are they high, medium, low income earners? What does that bring in terms of rental yields and people being able to pay back their rents? What sort of risk appetite do you have in working with those people? Obviously, the more infrastructure in the area, potentially the dearer the property, but what are the rental yields? And making sure that you're looking into the historical performance of the area to see what are your typical lows and your highs for when you're buying a property and what you should be paying for it. Vacancy rates. This data is really a lot easier and a lot more available than it ever has been. Like I said, you can jump on realestate.com, you can punch in the suburb, the postcode, the street, you can have a look at what's available in the area. If it's saturated with properties for rent, well, is that somewhere that you want to be putting your property on the market? Is that a market that you want to be buying in? Also don't forget to think about seasonality. Coming up to the end of university semesters and people moving in and moving out, if there's high fluctuations. Typically at the start of the year, a lot of people want to move into the area. So you keep those things in mind as well when looking at vacancy rates and all those sorts of things. Once again, obviously, the higher the occupancy rate, the higher the rent that you can demand, which is really important. Supply and demand always comes into play. Tax deductions and appreciation is something that a lot of people ask us about, and being able to have a depreciation schedule, obviously getting a quantitative surveyor out there. Sorry, all. That's a hard one to get out. Bit of a tongue twister. It is a great benefit. Okay, it can crystallise will help you understand the expenses of going into the property, and it can be then used to help with your tax depreciation. Okay, you can use that to lower your own tax obligations, and a lot of people use those to offset other gains, other losses. It's information that if you are creating upon purchase, and when it comes to selling the property, it makes it a lot easier for working out capital gains and all of those things, or potential losses, which hopefully no one goes through. But it is something to consider. We can help guide you there. There are some service providers that we work with who we help our clients, get those depreciation schedules for. It can be simple as something as, if you're going to fit out the bathroom, the depreciation on taps, sinks, new hot water systems, all those sorts of things, ovens, stoves, dishwashers, or you may be buying something brand new to get maximum amount of depreciation. So these are all things that you probably should sit down and review and have tailored to your personal situation as well. Mistakes to avoid. I haven't captured them all, but what I wanted to do is just high-levelly, you really need to make sure that you've got a plan, okay? Not planning to plan is planning to fail. Your plan should outline your strategy, so price point, what your expected return is, your budget that you're looking to drive, the cash flow that you need, not only in your own circumstances, but out of the property. Buying without research, buying on, the gut feel, I'd love to live here, leave the emotion out of the purchase. Keep it factual, keep it based on research. You're looking for places with historical rental returns. It's a long-term growth plan, so if you're expecting short-term wins, this is probably not the game for you. This is something where, a good extra few months worth of research will pay out in the longer term, okay? So keeping your finger on the pulse and understanding what's happening in different areas and different suburbs is really important. Remove the emotion. A lot of people, buy based on the fact they're going to live in that property, and we live here. I wouldn't pay rent. I wouldn't pay that. It's very dangerous to make those assumptions and to set an investment strategy or a plan based on emotion. So sometimes, you really got to detach the emotion from it and step back and look at everything very analytically. Managing your own property, same thing. You got to decide if that's, typical fees are sort of between that 7 to 9%, depending on who you're working with and the level of engagement you want from a property manager. Once again, it's an expense, so there are some tax advantages to those expenses when it comes to an investment. But you've really got to decide, do you want to be managing tenants? Do you want to be doing your own inspections? Do you want to be, the phone rings because the hot water system's not working, or, the water main out the front bursts, or the neighbours next door are too loud? Do you really want to be fielding all of those headaches? Or is that worth getting a property manager, an expert on board who's across legislation, who knows the ins and outs of the industry and is really there to support you through the process? And don't forget, they also have a great database and really, I know we here have so many people applying to rent properties that we actually know who's looking to rent in what streets and what areas, that we're able to, target those people. And the biggest enemy of an investor is cash flow. And if you don't have people in those properties with cash coming in and not meeting those obligations, it can potentially sink you and send you backwards faster than you can go forward. So, you've got to think about sometimes, is that investment worthwhile, and what are you best at, managing property, or being a school teacher and driving your income and really doing a great job, or being an accountant and moving as many files through the process as you can to create more wealth and income for yourself to buy more properties. It's all that time reward. Paying too much, biggest fear of everyone. Do your research. With our clients, all bank valuations are done. We send valuers out to the properties to make sure that the properties are meeting market expectations and our clients aren't paying too much. Do be mindful of situations where you're at auctions and things like that, where the price can get drived up. Obviously, you're committed there, and those valuations and all that research should be done prior. There's lots of resources and tools out there. RP data, like I said, you can go on now, pretty much type in an address in Google and find out historical sale prices for properties. So research. That's all I can say. The only way to prevent yourself from paying too much is to empower yourself with knowledge about the area. And once again, forgetting about that depreciation, there's some potentially hidden advantages there that save you some tax through the way, and also once again setting that cost base and all of those things of the asset for moving forward when inevitably, like I said, that long-term plan. What happens when you want to start unwinding property? What happens 10, 15, 20 years down the track? Oh shit, what do we pay for that property? if I sell it, what's my capital gains implications going to be? All of those sorts of things to consider. So equity. I think before the seminar, one of the biggest things that people wanted to know about was what is equity and how do we use it. So this slide, this picture, I love it. It's really simple. You've got your loan amount, so current loan balance there of $150,000. So that's the debt that you still owe to the bank, okay? You potentially over the time, you've got a $500,000 house, you may have bought it for 400, it's gone up in value to 500, and you paid down $250,000 over time. You've been making extra repayments, you just want to get rid of that debt, you don't want to be a slave to the bank. It's non-deductible, it's bad debt to have, okay? You can't deduct it, it's just there. And then, so you've now, I guess, built up that $250,000 worth of equity, and you can see there that 20% safety net. So most institutions these days are very conservative, the banking institutions, and they want to see, you know, a 20% buffer on someone's home. Okay, so an LVR of 20% before they'll release equity. So you can't refinance back up to 95% and take it all out. Okay, you'll trigger potential expensive costs like LMI and things like that. But it is important to sit down and review your situation because it might be worthwhile taking that hit to move forward. Okay, not saying that it is in everyone's situation. It just depends on your time horizon and what you need to get out of your investment strategy. So we've identified we've got $250,000 worth of equity. We've got an existing loan balance of $150,000. And we've got our $100,000, our 20% safety net there, with a total value of our home of about $500,000. So to utilise that equity, so the equity, like we saw before, was the $250,000 in our property. Okay, so we've gone to our bank and we want to refinance up to 80% and be able to draw down some of that equity that we have in our home. Okay, so as we can see here in diagram 2. We're transferring 120,000, the yellow portion, across to our diagram 3, which is our investment property, which also happens to be a $500,000 investment property in this circumstance. Okay, we're using $100,000 of our equity as a deposit on the investment property, and we've set aside $20,000 for costs, stamp duty, all of those things, conveyancing fees, building and pest inspections. All of those costs that we're going to incur in purchasing an investment property. Okay, so as you can see there, we haven't actually put our hands into our physical pockets, our cash savings that we may have off to the side. We've just used the equity from our home. And having taken that 120 now means that we've got 130 left in our home, plus our 20% buffer of $100,000. Okay, so our loan that we would have on our family home, okay, has gone up by $120,000 to $270,000. Okay, so we'd still be paying down that debt and obligated to the bank for repayments on that. So it's important to make sure that, you know, those increased payments, you know, we've got cash flow to service, and then also the impact of adding on an investment property at $500K as well. So we've got another $400,000 debt that now sits over here associated with our investment property. So this is how we're starting to grow our investment portfolio using equity. So it would be fair to say that in this situation, if diagram 2 actually became our first investment property, okay, and we started to pay down its debt and it went up in value, we too could then replicate this strategy to buy another investment property. And that's where we can then start to create our wealth creation. Okay, it may be that we do some renovations or some works to the property, okay, to help create and accelerate the value of that property. There are all these strategies, or you may be time poor and you can't afford to do that, and we're just waiting on the asset value to go up, and you're saving like mad, and you're creating your next deposit for your next investment. There's all many different ways of getting and growing that portfolio. So essentially, equity is the portion of your property that you can refinance out to make other purchases. It doesn't just have to be for homes, but in this strategy, we're looking to build wealth. So to go on holidays and buy cars, probably not the right choices. Okay, so once we start to add another property, you probably saw that lovely cross of the 120 coming across. Okay, there's a term in the lending industry called cross-securitization or cross-collateralization, and it's something to be aware of. It may be something that you need to do to help your strategy, but you've got to be aware of its limitations, right? So what's wrong with it? The lenders start controlling how you use your money. If we were to sell down, so if we go back here, and we in diagram 2, we want to sell the family home and upgrade to an $800,000 house. Okay, and we've cross-securitized the two assets, the investment property and the family home. Okay, we now have a global borrowing limit that sits across those two houses. And if, for example, the value of the rental property had come down and you've gone to sell the family home and utilise the equity that exists in that home to then go and get a new family home at an 80% LVR at 700,000, for example, or 800,000. You may not have enough equity in there because the bank says, well, hold on a second, you've got to maintain your LVR on your investment property, so we now need to take $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 out of the sales proceeds of that house and stick it on this loan. Now, all of a sudden, your deposit for the next family home has been reduced. All right, so you may now no longer have the minimum deposit needed to go and upsize the family home, and you are unaware of this, or this all unfolds as you're selling the home. Okay, a horrible situation to be in, but this is potentially what could happen without fully understanding if your situation is cross-securitized. So that's what I mean by the lenders have control. They can dictate that. It's in the terms and the agreements that you sign when you set the loan up. There are some limiting situations where it's good, and that's, you know, if you know that it exists and you're leveraging it to get into your investment property, but your plan is to restructure your portfolio down the track so though that doesn't happen, and you don't go and sell the family home and have the lender rather dictating where the equity goes. And what's wrong? Well, cross-securitization, like I said, can cause many problems, ending up costing you money or even stopping you from purchasing more property. Okay. So it's important that, once again, you're just aware of it. And it can be a strategy to help, but it can cause you some problems and headaches down the path, especially in a turbulent market where property prices are fluctuating and going up and down, and you're trying to build wealth over a long-term horizon. Okay. So what does it look like? Obviously using equity and savings to grow a property to close your wealth gap. All right. As you can see here, we're looking at a 9-year time horizon in this scenario. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone can do this over this period. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to build a property portfolio worth $3.5 million either. Once again, if you go back to that initial slide we had where we talked about what's your gap, it's then about creating a strategy if you want to use property like this, where you may only need to get 3 properties. It may be a gap of 1.7, or you may have a gap of 10 million and you need to get more properties, okay? But there's different strategies around that as well. So this is just a really good graphical representation of how we can help you work towards where you want to be, okay? So there you can see, first year we've bought our home $480,000. We can utilise some savings and equity over a 2-year time horizon, okay? Really important to understand what is your savings capacity. What are you prepared to sacrifice? A lot of talk in the industry about the smashed avo. You know, you avo in, avo out, whatever. I don't mind. You might want to focus on turning your $480,000 purchase into $520,000 from a renovator where you painted and you put elbow grease in and it hasn't been substantial costs. Okay, growing that then to 2 properties in year 3. Same philosophy, same mentality. Working through the years to year 5. That's why it's really important if you're doing your research and you stumble across some undervalued properties. Okay, you can potentially create equity when you purchase the home. Okay, there may be some distressed sales. There may be, you know, a suburb that's gone off the boil, or the street over. You know, there's a lot of demand in that area, and the street over falls into the next suburb that might not be as desirable, but in the next 4 to 5 years, the proximity to the CBD may mean that that street's now just as desirable regardless of the suburb name. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage those situations to accelerate your portfolio. Now, I mean, over the time, you may get to the point where you want to start considering, well, residential property, managing that many tenants is a headache. How do we then move into commercial property and start working with commercial tenants? It's definitely something that we see our clients do. Doesn't necessarily have the capital growth, but it has the yield. And the yield is the income that you may need to support your lifestyle moving forward as well. So all great strategies, all things to consider. Like I said, if you get started now, you know, you might be 50, looking to move into retirement at 60, and there is, you know, potentially strap on your boots and get laser focused, and we can achieve this. If you're, you know, 35 and you've just had the promotion and you've got the extra income coming through, you know, don't go and upgrade the cars just yet. Get on the strategy, start putting some money aside to accelerate your wealth gap, and close your wealth gap. Okay, the sooner you start, the more exponential growth, and the more that you can start leveraging this strategy to move forward. Like I said, you may be teaming up with some friends or some family, and you may be able to achieve this in half the amount of time because you've increased the amount of capital flow that you can put into the strategy. Okay. Feel free to send those questions through if you've got any. Happy to ask. Happy to answer. Not a Jedi mind reader, so it makes it a little bit difficult when we're not all in the room together. Typically, some of the questions that I then get asked is, you know, how much can I borrow? What are my limits? I've been to a couple of different lenders, and they all tell me I can borrow different amounts. I mean, not all lenders are the same, and I think it's really important that you know, work with a potential mortgage broker. It's interesting stats at the moment. Majority of people getting finance are working with a broker. They're understanding the broker value proposition of being able to compare all lenders that are in the marketplace, helping drive competition, and you know, it's a wonderful free service that the banks pay the brokers as if they pay their staff in a branch. But you've got someone that actually will compare different banks to get you to where you want to be. And like we spoke about before with the cross securitization, you might get to a point where the banks have got what they would classify enough risk on you as a person. They've lent you enough money, and it may be time to start spreading that risk across different lenders. So you might have, you know, $1 million with CBA, you might have $1 million with ANZ, and you might have, you know, 800 to 500 with St George. And that may be driven by the fact that, you know, a particular area that you wanted to buy in, particular lenders didn't want to lend to the amount that other lenders would to help you get your strategy moving forward. So lots of different variances in the background there. There's a lot of talk about assessment rates at the moment in the industry. Different banks will assess your borrowing capacity and your ability to service debt differently. So as you start to become an investor or grow your family or grow your personal debt, definitely you need to start reviewing different lenders, because you don't want to be hamstrung by the lender's policy or the lender's appetite at the time of creating your wealth. So like I said there, we're happy to have those conversations and take it on that pathway. We do a lot of this, so it's something that we're very familiar with. What deposit will I need? Well, once again, it'll depend on whether we're getting equity from your home, okay? So equity is a funny thing. It can be a bit of an opinion. What is the value of my home, okay? You go to the bank, you send a valuer out there. Just be careful, some banks will want to charge you for sending out a valuer. Beautiful part about working, once again, with a broker, well, not all brokers, but our brokerage, we have access to order free valuations on properties, so we can get a valuer out there to really get their opinion on where your property sits in the market. Okay. Now, unfortunately, valuers, the opinions, I mean, everyone's got one. They can be varied. It might be that the valuer doesn't like where they bought houses in that suburb. So we tend to send three valuers out to your property from different lenders to get an idea for where people see the property in the marketplace. Because when you're trying to access equity, if someone was to value your house at 500 versus 525, that's a lot of equity that a conservative value has been versus a potential value at 525. And you may find that the third one comes in at 520, 515. So if you were to sit back and just take the advice of one person, it could potentially stifle your ability to accelerate your wealth creation strategy. Okay. So they're just, once again, very high level things that we see day to day, and some tips and tricks that we do for our customers to help them get to where they want to be. important to consider the costs. We see a lot of people, especially first home buyers, who are able to get into the market at the moment. They're not paying stamp duty. If you're buying something new, you get in the first homeowners grant. A lot of people don't actually understand stamp duty that's associated with buying a home. It can be quite expensive. And different states charge different duties and different taxes, okay? So it's really important to understand those fees and what's associated in each state, especially if you're looking to diversify your portfolio and not just concentrate your property in one state. It's probably been a really good example over the last 3 to 4 years, maybe even the last 10 years of we're one big country, but state to state can suffer different economic booms and busts. So I'm kicking myself. About 5 years ago, I jokingly said, should buy a house at Hobart, should buy a house down there. It's typically when every other city booms, it follows and it takes a long time, but it gets there. Okay, and what are we seeing? Hobart now starting to go through the roof. Well, not through the roof, but it's moving in the right direction. And I would have made a nice little capital gains on a house down in Hobart. Okay, we're seeing Melbourne and Sydney. I think I just read an article where Melbourne's coming off the boil now. It's been 3 months in a row with property prices trending downwards. So we are seeing banks tighten up their policies for lending. So we're seeing that a lot of those cities that have really had a big run starting to cool off. And we're now starting to see a lot of value in Queensland and a lot of value over in a bit of value in Western Australia still. But once again, it comes down to suburbs and areas and doing the research. Okay. So I got a little sidetracked there. But our costs, so stamp duty, $350,000 purchase if you're buying in Queensland. The other day when I ran this, it was about $10,675. Okay. And then your typical mortgage registration fee, $181, and your transfer fees of $759. So remember back to that scenario where we used our equity, we put some money aside for those fees. Obviously, there'd be some marketing costs associated with getting your property on realestate.com, finding a tenant, getting a tenant in there, and there may be even some things that you want to do initially when you take the property over, just to make it a more attractive renter. It might need a lick of paint. These days, I know me personally, I hate washing the dishes, so having a dishwasher in there may become a bit more attractive to a potential tenant. Applying for a loan. Let me tell you, hasn't this got hard? A lot of our clients at the moment are pulling their hair out about how much information banks want, okay? They are really becoming diligent and they're scrutinising every application now to make reasonable inquiry into knowing their client, okay? So they're wanting to know how many children, dependent children, other loans, credit card limits, personal loan limits, outstanding balances. They're wanting up-to-date pay slips of a couple of months. They're wanting length of employment. There is a lot of information now that the banks are wanting. We saw an example the other day where a bank wanted to know, they saw on the photos of the valuation 4 bikes in the garage, and the client had only declared 2 children living in the property. And they had 4 bikes, for some reason, 4 bikes. You can see it was clearly a mum and dad bike and a son and daughter bike. But they're really digging now, saying, we want you to clarify, are there 2 children or are there more? So the banks are really going into those details now, some over the top, as that one would be, to make sure that they really understand their clients before proceeding with any lending. So please, it's not us asking for unnecessary information, it's what's required these days. Can you get an 90% interest only loan? So yeah, at the moment, there are lenders out there that'll do interest only. Good question. Not a lot of appetite out there at the moment. Couldn't tell you off the top of my head. There are some third-party, second, third-tier lenders out there that do have a little bit of appetite for that. You'd really want to consider your reasoning for chasing, I guess, interest only at the moment, given interest rates that are out there at the moment. We're seeing a lot of people coming off interest-only loans where actually P&I, so principal and interest repayments are quite measurable. So once again, you probably want to consider that in a holistic context to your situation and what you're trying to achieve. But Yeah, good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know of many lenders out there that have appetite up to 90% on interest only. Pre-approvals, everyone, it's a hot topic. I think when you're out there buying, especially if you're looking to utilise equity and buying an investment property, it is important to sit down and really have your whole situation reviewed and get that pre-approval. Working with a broker, you can go through the process of getting an approval in principle, which is really a more in-depth review of your situation, which can potentially just literally mean that it's pending the contract of sale to move the loan forward. So you've got that peace of mind of knowing that you've done the valuation, the bank agrees there's that much equity, they're going to lend you that amount of money, off you go, find the asset to match your investment strategy. So please, really get that pre-approval in place. Okay, so next steps from here. Please feel free to type in some questions. We've got a little bit of time left. There's that identify the gaps. So post the presentation tonight, there'll be an email that'll go out. It'll have a PDF version of that, so you can do it to your own circumstances. Okay. Please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact details there, mortgages@coronis.com.au, or you can give us a call in the office. Happy to have a chat. Like I said, get that financial health check, identify the level of support and engagement that you want us to play in it, or if you want some financial advice or you want to run it all, like I said, down the bottom there, we're here to help. We can get the strategy set, we can get you the loan, we can help find you the home. We can help find existing properties, so homes that have been built, or we can help find property turnkey, off the plan, all of those sorts of things. An equity check, so pretty much having had a sit down and getting an understanding of where your property's at, we'll do a quick RP data report, make sure that it's worthwhile going through a full valuation, getting someone out to your home and reviewing the equity and getting a feeling for how much equity you've got in your home to help get you started. Like I said at the start, I find that a lot of people are closer than what they realise. The Brisbane market, the Queensland market has moved. Maybe not so much for townhouses and units, but for homes, it's definitely had a bit of a run, so there could be some equity in there that you don't know about just yet. So that's us. I hope you found tonight, there's been a lot of information. I hope you found it useful. Like I said, it's really about inspiring you to get the ball rolling, identify the gap, don't be scared. There are people out there that can help you close that gap, okay? The last thing I'd want is to be living on that $33,000 a year pension in my retirement. Even if I was to take out the money that I spend on my mortgage and add that into my retirement, I still don't believe that would be enough. So please, the age pension, there's going to be a lot more demand on it as our ageing population in Queensland, in Australia, and more people become dependent on it. So I really encourage you to sit down and fill that form out, get an idea, and get inspired to take action. And we're here to help with any part of the strategy if you need. So feel free to reach out. Thanks, guys. Have we got any other questions there? No? Wonderful. Yeah, if you'd like to have an off-the-line chat, something a little bit more personal to your circumstances, please feel free to send through an email. I'll be on emails until 8:30, 9 o'clock tonight. And otherwise, we look forward to helping you out down the track. And I hope you found tonight helpful. Thanks, guys.